Right folks, welcome to this exciting video where you once again join me in the beautiful landscape of Scotland. And for today's adventure I've actually come to a land which may be familiar to long-term viewers of the channel. I've come to the top of Glen Clova and then up the road to Glen Doll. And this is one of these single remote kind of glens where there's one road up and you have to turn around at the top and come back down. But the interesting thing is, recently, probably like the tail end of summer, I documented a hill fort at the far end of the glen, or what I suspected to be a hill fort, and I can see the level piece of ground from here. But the interesting thing with today's video, there's actually another hill fort up behind what we can see is this big cliff. There's actually a level piece here which has been landscaped, and it's actually got fortified ditches and things like that. And I think that would date to around the same period as the other fort. And I've been meaning to come here for ages, but I was waiting until exploring season. Once all the ticks and stuff have died back, and once also all the ferns and stuff have died back as well. It's so much easier to come and see these locations. But yeah, I'm actually going to wait up here at this wee car park at the quarry, because Highlander's on his way up and he's going to join us for this adventure. It looks like quite a formidable steep climb no matter what way we go. I was kind of thinking I would go over here and then up the side of the forest we can see in the distance, but I think there is a couple of options for the way we go. But anyway, I'll update you once Highlander gets here and once we set off on this crazy wee adventure documenting a prehistoric hill fort. These things date back, can any time in history feel like 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. And it's incredible on this channel just to keep on documenting every week little bits of history we've never seen before on the channel. On a previous video as well, I've actually walked past the other hill fort right over these hills here, which I think is called Ben Craig, and then there's actually a mast at the top of it, and I've stood at the side of that mast looking over the land, and I was always meaning to come back to this hill fort, and that's why it's such a special wee adventure today. But I'll include at the end of this video, I'll link those other two videos so it's easy for you to click on them, or if you want to see the Glen Clova series with these hill forts, you can come back to this video and then easily get the link at the end of the video from that. But yeah, this is so cool. This is an old quarry from a certain time, and there's literally nobody parked here. I actually came up this glen yesterday to do this adventure, and the shooters were in the far field just shooting up that way at pheasants and whatnot, because that's basically what they were doing. The beaters were scaring the birds over and the shooters were just firing. And I thought, like, it's impossible to go on an adventure like that, and it's dangerous. So I've come all the way back today to make this possible, folks. So let's get into action. Check it out, folks. For this adventure we're now joined by special guest Highlander87. You can check him out on his own YouTube channel as well, Highlander87. Look at this. There's actually some weird fungus here at the side of the path, and we are just basically going up the Forestry Commission path. Instead of going straight up the middle of the cliff face on the dangerous icy rocks, we've decided to come up the side, and we should make our way right to the hilltop out onto the mad hill fort. So adventure on, folks. It's crazy because it's only 3 degrees Celsius today. The landscape is frozen, and through the week this whole land here was under snow. Since midweek it's actually all melted, and that's how you can see evidence here of recent waters flowing off the land. That's what washes out some of these roads and stuff. But yeah, what madness, folks. We're just on this adventure, pushing on up through this forest. It's quite steep terrain, that's why I've not been vlogging much. We're always just trying to catch our breath. Check it out, folks. Look at this beautiful alpine scene here with the little waterfall running down out of the wild forest. Yeah, that's crazy how much it's washed the forest floor away down there. It just drops into the abyss, into the trees, and we're just following the road as it switches back and cuts up through the land here. What a scene. When you see that, it's just such a mad landscape here at Glen Doll. And yeah, it's amazing. I think the hill we're going to is actually called Dun Mor. That's the name of the particular hill. On the old maps it doesn't actually mention that it's a hill fort, but that's what you often get with some of these remote landscapes. sometimes at a certain time the map makers and stuff didn't realise the prehistoric history underfoot in these wee glens. Anyway, I'll update you once we're coming out the side of this forest onto the wild hilltop. Check it out, folks, we're now coming out of the forest here, and look at this view with the faraway hills down to the quarry where we're parked. We've basically walked all the way around that main road and then up through this forest. And I think this is like a hill fort which are different sections here overlooking the glen. I think there's a main bit down here, but we're also going to go and have a look up in this area as well. Look how much water is actually running off the hill. I'm just punching on up here behind Highlander. Look at this view behind us, folks. We're literally walking about in the maddest of Scottish glens. And it's kind of Glen Doll right here. An absolutely beautiful landscape, and the sun's almost shining over the far hill. You can see it lighting up the hilltops at this side. Yeah, what an absolute madness. I've tried to come to this hill fort a few times, but like, yeah, there's been shooting on and stuff like that. Whew, I'm gassed out. Yeah, this area here, folks, was a fortified hill. Check it out, folks, this is us entering the hill fort right here. You can see this ridge in the land, and this was an outer defensive ditch, basically cutting off this piece of land from the rest of Scotland. It was almost like a trench, you could say, a defensive ditch, like we've documented recently at the Barry Hill fort. Now look at it here as well, a deep ditch. And look, you can see the mounds, which was most likely little buildings within this complex. And this would have been a small localised hill fort overlooking this land here, where you can see the wee river. I think it's called the Whitewater. It joins the river South Esk there in the wildlands. And then you can also see the great landscape leading on to Corrie Fee and such like areas in Scotland here. Look, we're right down in the defensive ditch, and you can really see how deep it is where I'm standing. And then in the defensive ditch there's actually this low point, but I'm not sure if that's eroded away just with the amount of years. Highlander's punching on up to the top here. I'm wanting to do a full circuit of this hill fort. It's just such a mad landscape, and today there's no actually as much wind as what you would expect being so high on a hill. Behind here as well there's a wee stream coming down. That would have been a source of water for the hill fort occupants. And it's cool to come here as well, because I've documented another hill fort in the same glen, and it's amazing to think they were actually probably operational at the same time, observing different parts of the glen. Sometimes the original hill forts were more localised, sometimes just a place of refuge for the locals at the time of an attack. Yeah, well, look at this. This is almost like a natural ridge here that was a natural defence along the edge of the hill fort. Yeah, look at how steep it is down there. I wonder if any of this is like original cutouts, kind of like a little building foundation, because it almost looks like on top of here it's been levelled. Wow, what a view here, folks, looking all around. And it's so steep down there. It's extremely defensive. With these Scottish hill forts, it was like they used their land a bit like the way they built a castle, but they made the landscape itself their castle, using natural shapes as boundaries. Maybe that was their original way up down there. Wow, that's incredible to see it. Maybe they had to make their way up that slope and then in, and that's how the ditch and stuff could be around that side with this natural peak in the land here. Wow, what a scene. I'm wanting to go right over and we'll have a look at the edge. I think there's been some areas where there's been little constructions or buildings. The first place I think was here, because it looks like there's definitely a shape there, like a hollow. And sometimes in the hill forts back in the day, they actually dug into the ground for their house, and then they would have had wooden beams over with often earth or turf, sometimes heather or any other bushes that's grown in the lands. They would just make their roof for their houses with that. Yeah, this is so interesting to see it. The shape of the land and the way the ditch gives away the location. So that makes me think the bit of hill behind us is more just a wild hilltop, because this is definitely the site of the hill fort. It's incredible to see it. I'm just blown away by the vastness and incredible like view. You can just see so far all around. And we're keeping it rolling right here, folks. You know how it is on this channel. I think I actually need to change the battery on this camera any minute now. But look at this, the view. This is what I was theorising is the original road in. And it could be because it's almost the same width. Remember the road into the other hill fort? It came up a slope like that. Yeah, the views with the mossy rocks. It's just incredible to see that. And look at the snow on the highest points of the hills. Through the week here in Glen Clova and Glen Doll, the snow was covering all the land. That's why the river South Esk is quite high just now with all that thawing. Yeah, there could have been... It's interesting because sometimes the bedrock is the high point, and then sometimes down low there might be remains. It's hard to see what's natural and what was part of the hill fort. See down here in this hollow, surely there was something constructed. There's loads of bits of this hill that's been levelled. See, like here. And once you go to this corner, think of the view. Not only the hill forts that we've documented in this glen, but also remember the Clova Castle. Yeah. That's a more modern fortified location. I think it had been like a medieval castle originally. Yeah, check out the view from here, looking down over like the public car park and stuff that takes you onto the Corrie Fee pathies. And look, we're on the outer perimeter here of the hill fort, and it's on a natural cliff. Trying to get up there would be an extreme mission. And yeah, I think there's metal posts being chapped in at a certain time. Maybe an old fence, or just to warn you not to go any further. Some of the cliffs are so steep. I just can't get enough of this view. It's like we're walking about a Scottish postcard. Look at these areas where probably there had been buildings. It's so level here. And then they could have just been in their buildings. Look at this level area down here. I think areas like that are where the prehistoric houses were. Just think of the view. See how there's another level area on the edge? They're almost like balconies. Yeah. And even if you look down from that direction, you wouldn't necessarily see these houses at this side. There's two clear level areas at this point. Wow, yeah, this is an extreme cliff that we're on right here, folks. Look at that, there's no way you would get up here. I can actually see my car parked down there. Wow, yeah, this is marking the edge so nobody falls over. Yeah, look at this, this area you're standing in has been another levelled foundation. And you can see it, it's almost been cut in. You can see the 90-degree shape. And the houses weren't too big back in those days. I'm going to change out the battery in the camera, folks. Within a little building where at one time somebody maybe sat, and just think how different this world out here was back at such an ancient time. Look at the view from a hill fort, and just think how you could have observed so many miles from a place like this. Also, before these trees were there, you could have probably made your way, well, you could have probably seen anybody making their way down here. See what I just noticed? There's been a landslide there. Do you see the fresh stones? On that hill leading on up that direction, folks, there's been a fresh landslide with loads of stones that's come down the hill. Sometimes in the winter that can happen on these stony hills. Yeah, up there's a real level bit. See, I wonder if there's more ancient prehistoric sites that's just almost forgotten, because the one down there we documented had never been seen, and I've only ever seen one other person document this one. And on Google Earth you can actually see the old outline of the ditch and the shape of the hill fort, and I theorised there was a second one up there, but it looks so extreme, because I think there's potentially been a wee cottage up there, but it would be a lot further than what we can see. I think to get to that we would be better going back onto the path, and then pop it out a wee bit further up instead of going up that bog. But look at this. Actually, we're keeping it rolling. I need to change this battery, folks, and then we'll keep it rolling. I just noticed this other section here, which is like a square of a building. This is amazing. Each little house would have been overlooking a different bit of the valley.
Look at that.
Yeah, it's just incredible. The shape of each bit. Then the wee sound of that waterfall coming in the background, and then look at those hills.
You can see your enemy for miles.
Yeah, it's such a perfect strategic position on the land, folks. You can see exactly why they had it here at a certain time. So that's it, folks. Fresh battery in the camera, and I was just coming lower down on this cliff to look at this hollow. This is maybe just a natural low point that's been washed out because of the shape of the rock at the edge. Because I'm not seeing a rectangular shape here. Look at this, how big chunks of this has actually been either naturally fallen off or they've been quarried off the edge of here. Maybe at a certain time they did quarry out where we see those rectangles for the houses. They maybe literally dug those houses out. And look, we're right on the edge here of the compound, folks. Look at this, how there's almost like a natural shape up here on the land, like a circle. You can see where Highlander is right around, and those individual houses are kind of on the perimeter. And I think there's probably been more down here on this bit. There's another level section down here. I'm waiting here we look, just to see if there's any remains of buildings. Some of these hill forts had a well, but I'm thinking with this one having that burn just coming right down past it, they probably didn't bother. I'm being really careful because it's a sheer cliff in most places. I'm pretty much right in the centre. Yeah, this is real interesting to see the landscape, and also to see how high that perimeter wall is of the hill fort. And there's hardly any people even realise, folks, that there's a hill fort here. But there's actually been history here for thousands of years, and on this channel we love covering it. Not only like the ducats and stuff like for the last video, for like the 1600s, but also stuff like this. We're talking probably like anywhere from like 700 BC to like older times. And it is just interesting to imagine how the land has probably changed since those times. It almost looks like there's been a wee track coming up into here, and then you would have come up to that area. But then that other low point we theorised was the entrance. That's it up there. So who would know the original approach? See, it's like it's been levelled there as well, like steps leading up. And they were known to quarry stuff because the later periods of the prehistoric times was like the Stone Age, when obviously they started doing a lot with the stone and the landscape and the building. And then the Iron Age, the Bronze Age. Well, I think the Bronze Age was first, and then they started using copper and then iron. And then it was kind of into the history that we know about, when the Romans and stuff came and invaded Britain, and then they left. And then it was like the medieval period. And then it was kind of into the times that was written down. But when things like this was on the go, the history's completely gone as to what was going on. The only clue that's left behind is what we can see today. And that's why I love coming to these more mysterious locations in such vast, wild places as this. All Scottish hill forts weren't always on the highest point of the hill either. In places like this, they were often just in a more strategic point of the hill. Like this one's set quite far from that big hill, and it's set away from the main sides of the glen. Yeah.
I think they wouldn't need to quarry.
Aye, they wouldn't need to quarry anything. I was thinking the only reason would be so they could
just level it.
Aye, shape the hill to what they needed. But then sometimes different hill forts like this might have not been like the other Iron Age ones that we see. This was maybe more of a localised area. If the glen got invaded, they would come here for like a week or whatever until the invasion was sorted out, and then they would go back down to safety. But who would know as well? That's just also theories. Sometimes that's thought to be back at the times when it was a more of a like a local community. This would have been the hill fort for the safety of this community that can be seen in this area. They would run up here at the time of attack just for safety. That's why it was a defensive position on the land. And I can see the cars down there. This is a mad scene because that quarry behind the car park looks super high until you're standing up here. It just looks tiny. Yeah, back then, this would have been more flooded potentially in front of us. The land could have been wetter, but also the land could have been greener. Maybe as well the land was drier, for all we know. But for sure, probably these hills were still there. And that's the mad thing to think about. They would have been looking over, and everything else has changed so much. Like the culture of the people walking about and a thing like this, and the fact this is just completely forgotten now. To many folk it looks like every other hill in the land, but it's got that story of the hill fort to tell, and it's been cool today to see that. I think we'll go round this perimeter edge. We've basically gone round the hill fort so far in a circle. It's interesting that those bedrock seams are right in the middle. I think there's been more buildings here where we can see the level areas. That's the crazy thing when you're inside these hill forts. It's just, that's when you realise how perfectly levelled some of the landscape is. And it's often like a sure sign that there's been a little house. Because in Scotland there's hardly ever little areas like that that's so perfectly level for a foundation. Normally it's like this. Rugged and wild. Unforgiving terrain. It is super interesting to see that. That was the original bit we thought was the entrance in, but it is just crazy to analyse it and to theorise. As we were walking around, we imagined the people that originally walked through a thing like this. And I wonder what they had for like defensive weapons and things back there as well. Maybe a bow and arrow. Or maybe weapons and armour that they had to craft and create from what they had all around here. Animal skins and things like that. That's what they would have had for their clothes as well back in those days. Probably wools from the sheep that they would be making their clothes for. Yeah, it's interesting because the defensive ditches are at that far side. So definitely this high hill was part of the hill fort design. And it's probably helping it to be defended from that side to a certain degree because it's such a sheer cliff at the far edge. And then we've got this whole middle section here of the hill fort to the far away edge, down onto that other plateau at the far side, and then back over this side. On the far hill, the trees have been devastated from the winds a couple of years ago. It's amazing to see that. And in the summertime, I actually went on a mad adventure right up to the top of that hill, and I'll link the video at the end of this so you can get an idea of how the land looks. At that time I was looking down on this hill fort and I had no idea at that moment. I'm going to go over to the edge of this stones here for a proper look. Let's go folks, the camera's rolling. I'm just keeping this one rolling because it's so much fun often when we find something like this, throwing it on, and then the viewers can get an idea of it as well from the footage I record. So sometimes just walk around aiming the camera each direction so you get an idea of what the people saw when they were walking about here. Yeah, look at this on the edge of this rocks. Yeah, that's cool because it looks like that's been hollowed out or shaped. Almost like what we saw. There's bits been chipped or broken off, but I think here it's a lot of it's just natural formations in the land. I think the actual level areas is more what has been created. The bits where we saw the rectangles for the little houses and things like that, all that could have been buildings. A lot of the other ditches we can see are the defensive ditches that go around the perimeter of this. And we'll take a look at that right here. I'm going to walk right up into that defensive ditch. Let's go folks. Look here, look at the shape in the land. It's just incredible to see it. The amount of work that's been done to landscape these hills at an ancient time in Scotland. You can see this ridge that would have been dug out from each side and thrown up here, and then dug out from this hollow here and thrown up, and it would just lead right the way around the site. And what a cool scene of this site it is. Highlanders waving me over. So I've just followed along this defensive ditch line here, And I'm just going to the edge of this cliff to see what it looks like, to see if it's been landscaped. And yeah, look how it's naturally defended here. So if anybody came up and round and tried to invade, that's why they've built this defensive ditch at this point. And then they would be up here firing down on you if you were trying to invade. Let's go and see what Highlander was pointing out here. He's found something in the land. Here he is over here, folks, check him out. He looks small, and that shows you the size of these hill forts. All the way around from that strategic defensive ditch to these levelled areas of the house foundations. You can see the size of them compared to a human being in the distance. And it shows you what a vast, complex project it would have been to build this at such an ancient time. Look at this, folks. Highlanders actually sourced what was most likely the well on the hill fort. Earlier in the video I mentioned that they often had a well, and that was like a fresh source of water. Look at that, today it's frozen solid. It's frozen over. But that is incredible, so they would have had a source of water here. So they could have been under siege for maybe days or weeks, and they would have been able to survive. Maybe they had stuff stored here, or certain hunting parties would go out to get food or whatever back at those times. But there you go, actually, the source of water's within that area. I just looked at the defensive ditch and then followed it to the edge of that cliff, and like they would have come up that hill potentially around, and the ditch would have been the defence from that side. It's so crazy to see it and to imagine the sort of people that may have been running up there to invade. Like, what were they wearing? What did they have? Like, did they have a bow and arrow? Like, I'd be like, honestly, mate, chill out. It's just crazy to imagine that history. Look, here's the well, probably at one time dug out. If you consider like 2,000 or 3,000 years has passed, think how much years of like greenery that is growing up and dying down and just filling this up. And it's almost like a peaty-like substance that turns to earth. And years and years and years go by. And that's why a hill fort that at one time probably looked like a wee town just looks like this. And yeah, the landscape is just so vast and crazy. So there we go, folks. I think I've documented every aspect of this incredible ancient prehistoric hill fort in the lands kind of between Glen Clova and Glen Doll. And it is just absolutely amazing to explore places like this. In exploring season, it's this time of year once again, even though it's only 3 degrees Celsius or colder, we're still out here. But yeah, we're away to punch on to another location further up this hill now, folks. So if you want to see that, tune in to the next video. I'm going to end this one here. Goodbye from me, goodbye from Highlander 87, and we'll see you soon for the next one, if we can even get up to this place we're going.